Hey, this is Hutch, and today we're going to talk about the true cost of an athletic scholarship. And the reason I bring this up is because my daughter Karina, who's 8 years old right now, is really getting into tennis. She's pretty good too. And I've made the comment of, wow, what if when she's 18, she could actually earn a scholarship playing tennis and save our family a few $100,000 or whatever that's going to cost then. My wife was discussing this with a friend of ours who was talking about parents who are very passionate about their kids' sports and spend all kinds of money on teams and trips and clinics and equipment and everything else. And if they just put that money into some kind of diversified college fund, could they just invest that money and have enough to just pay for the college outright? And although that's a perfectly valid hypothesis, I wanted to test and measure and see if that's true. And so I started reading articles about cost of club sports, and I wanted to test and measure and see if, strictly from a return on cash investment, if this would pencil out. Assuming your kid's into sports and they like it and enjoy it, and forgetting all the other ancillary benefits that come with that, just from a return on cash, is this worth it? So I thought I'd take a look at that and bring you all along too. I first need to get the cost of colleges, so I'm going to look at a couple California universities. One of them is Stanford, very prestigious college in Northern California. And if we look at the cost here, what we're looking at for tuition and fees is 46 grand, room and board another 14. We're over 60 right there. Added books and supplies, we're over 61. And if I look at another good university, slightly less prestigious, but University of California, Santa Cruz, if we look at those costs, being an in-state resident, I'm only looking at 13 and change for tuition and fees, 14 and change for room and board, add-in books and supplies, I'm over 29. Now, these are the costs today. And what I need to do now is I need to fast forward that 10 years in time. So I have our handy dandy present value calculation. So let's just look at the 29,000 for University of Santa Cruz 10 years from now, using an inflation rate. And they say that college is one of the highest inflating expenses. In fact, they've been saying it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 8. Let's just use the 5% conservative end. What we're looking at is $47,000 10 years from now. That's for in-state tuition, fees, room and board at Santa Cruz. Now, if I plug in the Stanford number, we're looking at $99,000. So let's bring this over to a return of investment calculator, or IRR, internal rate of return calculator. And let's look at a 14-year study period. 10 years until she goes to college, and 4 years when she earns her scholarship. So let's use some different numbers here. I'm going to go way on the high end for just a moment and just say, what if it's $10,000? And this may seem outrageous, but from what I was reading, it may not be. And so I just wanted to test, a very extreme number. And I'm going to inflate the 10,000 by 5% every year because the cost of lessons, equipment, everything else is going to go up. And let's just use our $47,000 number, which, if you remember, that was really today's $29,000 for Santa Cruz. And again, we'll inflate this number for 4 years. So you can see the cash flows. This is what we're paying in, right, to developing a child athlete. And this is what, in all practical purposes, you receive because you don't have to pay it out for tuition. So if I click calculate here, what this says is even paying $10,000 and earning the smaller scholarship, it's still a 7% IRR, which isn't too bad. Now, what's interesting is if I just make this 12,000 for the next 10 years, it's going to bring our IRR down substantially, down to about 4.5%. Now, what's interesting is if I plug in the more expensive college, if I put $99,000, now we're looking at an IRR of 15.5%, which is obviously a pretty good IRR. But this may be, quite exorbitant, the cash flows I'm putting in. What if it's, say, with travel teams, memberships to clubs and everything else, it's only $6,000 for the expensive college? That's a pretty healthy IRR. And even if I plug in the $47,000 Santa Cruz tuition, we're looking at close to 15% IRR, which isn't too bad. Then there's always the off chance that your kid may be like Jordan Spieth, who won the Masters recently, who has absolutely been demolishing the PGA Tour. So if I plug in a couple $1,000,000 after dropping out the first year and inflate it by 100% each year, well, the IRR is absolutely off the charts. There's always a possibility, though, that your kid may not get a scholarship. And if you take a look at Jordan and the amount of humility there, and obviously the values he learned, the team building, camaraderie, competitive nature, and everything else, these are some of the intangibles that can't be measured by dollars. And that's the main reason why most parents get their kids into sports. You have to measure the risk, reward, cost, benefit, etc., just like any other major financial decision. But I found this whole study interesting, and I hope you all did too.